Everybody, how you doing? I'm Mark Staton. I'm director of the MBA program, and welcome to our latest one-day MBA series. We're calling it How Data Leads to Strategy. Before I get into further introductions, I'd just like to say that Western Washington University's main campus is situated on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin all throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. We express our deepest respect and gratitude to our Indigenous neighbors for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. So first, again, the WWU MBA program and the Western Washington University Alumni Association are excited to welcome you to today's WWU One-Day MBA webinar, How Data Leads to Strategy. Yeah, we had in the past, we've been calling these like the Thought Leaders webinar series. And I just decided that One Day MBA is a better name because it's shorter and it rhymes. So, but today our speaker is Western Washington University MBA Advisory Board member, Sachin Pai. Sachin is joining us with extensive background in marketing analytics. He has worked across multiple industries, including banking, IT, nonprofits, governmental organizations, and startups. Sachin is currently at AWS, also known as Amazon Web Services, where he leads the global growth reporting and analytics team. Sachin got his MBA at the Yale School of Management in Connecticut and his BA at Brandeis University in Massachusetts. And he currently lives in Bellingham with his wife and 3 kids. And I can say that from personal experience that besides being really smart, he's a really great guy too. So a little housekeeping before we dive in. Some of you have submitted questions with your registration, and we really appreciate those. If you haven't submitted a question already, that's fine. During the webinar, if an idea comes up about a question that you'd like to ask, please use the Zoom Q&A feature, which should be at the bottom middle of your screen. That will send any questions, and we will be responding to all the questions, both the ones that came in before and during the webinar, during the Q&A section at the end of the presentation. And we'll do our best to try and answer as many as we are able to during our time today. Finally, we recommend that you use the speaker view as part in your Zoom window. That's the best experience. And let's get started. I'm handing it off to my friend Sachin, and I'm going to mute myself more than normal because I have a awful cough, and I don't want to cough in the middle of Sachin's talking. So here you go, Sachin, take over. You're muted, buddy.
Classic Zoom start.
Classic.
Thank you, Mark, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for attending. It's an honor to be invited to be part of this series, and I'm really excited to share with you what I've experienced in terms of data and how it leads to strategy, as the title of this meeting. Just give you an introduction, some kind of professional experience about myself. Oh, sorry, Mark, can you see my screen?
No, I don't see it yet.
You don't see my screen, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I see
it. You see it now?
Yeah,
awesome. Okay.
Yep.
So data leads to strategy. Okay, fantastic. So I'll just give you a quick introduction about myself and my background. So again, my name is Sachin Pai. I head up reporting and analytics in the Global Growth and Marketing organization at Amazon Web Services. I'm fairly new here. I've been here for about 7 months so far. So still a lot to learn, a lot to do in this space. My background, as Mark mentioned before, it's spanned a variety of different industries, banking, big tech like IBM and Amazon, banking at Barclays City, startup at a masterclass, which was a really fun experience. And before that, I was actually in the nonprofit and the government space at AmeriCorps and Big Brothers Big Sisters. And I did that actually before I went to business school. So maybe sometime over drinks, I could tell you about the transition from nonprofit to how I got lured into corporate America. And before that, I went to Brandeis, where I studied economics, and I got a minor in music. So that's a bit about me and my background. Let me tell you about the why. The why I do is for my 3 little kids here, picture on the left. This is from earlier this week when we celebrated Diwali at our house. And this is a picture of them also posing for their Bollywood headshots. My youngest one's got a little bit more room to improve on his floss or his blue steel, but he's working on it. And this is on the right-hand side is all the place I live. So I'm originally from Wayne, New Jersey, but I've lived really all over the country. Really got a great opportunity to see different parts of the world, different parts of the country, and ultimately ended up here in Bellingham, Washington. My wife dragged me out here about 8 years ago after we had our son in Brooklyn. And we realized Brooklyn or raising a kid in New York is near impossible. And she's like, do you want to go to Bellingham? I'm like, where? Where's that? And then she dragged me out here, and then we've been here for 8 years, and we've been happy ever since. So yeah, it's been a great time to live here. We've had a great time living out here, and really happy about what this place provides us and our family. So let me talk to you a little bit about data. So first, for all the people on the call, people working at companies, I would argue that data is your most valuable asset that you have. If you look at the top 10 or the top 10, I forget, I did a number before here, but like 10 of the top 50 companies on S&P 500, they're all based on data. They're data providers, data companies, they use data to make decisions. So if you think about Facebook, Amazon, IBM, Microsoft, they all revolve around data. And it's not just these tech companies or these big tech companies that use data. It's every company can and should use data to make the most optimal decision for their customers. About 10 years ago, 5-10 years ago, my CEO at the time from IBM, Ginny Romanetti, she would say that data is the new oil. And what she meant by that is that, if you think about the Industrial Revolution, it was really defined by like energy and oil and all this stuff driving the Industrial Revolution. And data is going to do this, is doing the same thing now. A whole field of jobs and careers have opened up around data engineering, data analytics, data science, all this stuff about understanding data and making the best use of it for their customers. And that's where I've spent most of my career on the data side. I'll talk to you more, I want to talk to you about measurement and what measurement really means. So you have all this data, but what do we do with this data? And I like to divide this up into 3 different areas, or kind of 4 areas, but I'll talk about the 3 areas first. So I call it descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. So one is descriptive. When I think about descriptive, that's more like looking backwards. What happened? What happened in the past? So if you think about marketing, how many impressions, how much marketing money did I spend? How much media did I buy? If you think about product, how many people are using the product? What are they doing on the product? But it's all backwards looking, right? And that's really critical for any organization. And I'll talk about the sub bullets in a bit afterwards. The next section is called predictive. Why did it happen, right? You start to understand not only what happened, but why did things happen? Why did things happen? What are the drivers for that, right? And you use a variety of techniques like regressions or other models, whatever, to understand what actually was the root cause of that behavior that occurred. And finally, and I would argue this is probably the most important part, is what should we do? What should our organization do? So several of you who are leaders in a company organization, that's what you need. It's nice to see the data and what happened and why did things happen, but you don't have the time to really understand that. What you want and what my stakeholders ask for is, tell me what I should do, right? You see all the numbers, you see all what's happening, you see all like the patterns in the analysis and the data. Tell me as a marketing leader, as a decision maker, tell me what I should do. And that's really the ultimate use of the data. It's like, what action should we take? The sub bullets, let me talk about descriptive data. So when I talk about what happened, a lot of that means democratizing access to data. And what I mean by that is historically, data has been sitting in the hands of limited people, right? Like a few people have access to the data. It doesn't help. If we believe this notion that data is the most valuable asset, we should democratize that. So all levels of organization, from the CEO down to the person, the most junior analyst or junior marketer, they are understanding what's happening in the company to make decisions. And that's a critical point to any company, is democratizing data. And what that means is really just dashboarding, reporting, and making sure everyone has access to that. So when you come to meetings, when you come to have conversations, right, especially with the analytics teams, it's not about just reporting, saying this happened, this happened, this happened. That's not an effective use of time. I would argue that the conversation is be at a higher level. So the data, everyone understands the data, everyone knows what happened. Now the conversation can be focused more on the 2 other areas, predictive and prescriptive, more on the prescriptive side. But having democratizing access to data is a huge part of becoming a data-driven organization. In terms of understanding drivers and data-driven actions, that's more on the data science side. And that's where like there's all these different techniques that are being developed or already developed to understand why things happen, right? So it's really kind of digging a level deeper, not just what happened, but why did it happen? And they're using different techniques, like for those who remember their statistics class is like regression modeling, to say like, hey, this is why things happen. This is what actually caused these events to occur. And the last bit is, after you've done this kind of predictive modeling, doing the regression, is the optimization process, right? And this is the most critical part of the conversation in terms of analytics, is tell me what to do, right? So you're doing all this analysis, and then you're running an optimization on top of it. This gives the most optimal data-driven decision to make the right impact on the customer. All of this will happen with a quality data platform. And that's really critical. It may sound mundane, but it's so critical to the success of any organization. Oftentimes, data sits in silos. So you have your marketing data sitting in one place, your finance data sitting in another place, and then your product data sitting in another place. And if the data sits in silos, so does the decision making. Unless you have all that data sitting in one cohesive place, you cannot make a holistic decision that's optimized for your customer or your client. This is where data engineers are spending a lot of time stitching data together from disparate data sources to make a unified view of what's happening. So even though it's like the boring part of the job, it's a critical part of the job for all these higher level things to happen: descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, and especially prescriptive analytics, right? You need to have a clean, perfect data environment, and like companies spend a lot of time on it, a lot of time trying to solve this issue. Even we at Amazon, where we are the cloud provider, we still struggle with it, right? So having a centralized data platform is the key to success of any organization. I'll move on a bit to marketing effectiveness and marketing analytics. And this is really where I spend most of my time, I'm really passionate about. So for those in the marketing space, hopefully you'll get a few nuggets of good information out of here. And I'll love to talk to you more afterwards if you have more questions. So a lot of times, marketing, let's talk about marketing. Marketers, they put a bunch of media out in the market, right? They buy some TV, they buy some Facebook, some Google, some TikTok ads, right? They put them out there, and they, like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they just kind of crossed their fingers, right? There's a famous saying by this, like the founder of Macy's, I mean, John Wanamaker, said like, half my media works, I just don't know which half, right? And that's because like you put all this media out there, you don't really know what's working, what's not working. And that's where I spend most of my thinking about, is understanding the effectiveness of media marketing. There's several techniques used to measure effectiveness, but I'll start all the way on the right-hand side, called incrementality, or randomized control trials. And randomized control trials actually started in the pharmaceutical industry, right? So you have a new medicine that's been research introduced, and you want to understand the efficacy of that medicine. So you do like a classic test, right? You have this holdout, this control population, which receives a placebo, and you have this test population, which receives the intervention or the medicine or the marketing messaging, right? And then you kind of study them over time. And through that research and study, you understand, okay, did this intervention or this marketing lever or whatever, this Facebook ad, actually drive an incremental lift on my goal, right? Trying to conversion, selling some account. And that's the gold standard in terms of marketing measurement. It's incrementality, or RCT, or incrementality testing, right? The other technique on the bottom of the screen is called multi-touch attribution. This is digital tracking, right? And what digital tracking is, you're understanding at the user level, and by user I mean cookie level, what media have they been exposed to? So we look at Mark, we know deterministic. I know for a fact that Mark saw this Facebook ad. I also know for a fact that Mark saw this other ad, and he also saw this paid search ad, right? And then through that, we do this millions and millions of times for every customer that comes through the funnel, right? So we know that person A saw these ads, didn't see these ads, and we start building a model, right? So after you collect all this data, at the user level, you're trying to build an understanding of what's working, the effectiveness of what's working and what's not working. You can start doing attribution. Say, okay, I want to give X% of credit to this channel, X% of this channel, and start building this up. And then the top one is marketing mix modeling. So marketing mix modeling, it's an older technique that was developed in the 70s, right? A fancy term is called econometric multivariate regression. It's just a fancy way of saying it's like a regression, if you remember that. It's like understanding how various levers impact your dependent variable or your conversion event, right? You're understanding, okay, I put some TV in market, and then what was the response? Did sales go up or go down? I put some Facebook in market, the sales go up or down, right? And you're doing this over like 24 months, 102 weeks, and starting to understanding how those relationships work. One of the things I tell my team all the time, so these are like the 3 basic tools of measuring marketing effectiveness. And then people always argue about which is the best one, which one to use for the company, right? And people say, no, we're only doing MTA, multi-touch attribution. No, we're doing MMM, we're doing incrementality. And what I tell my team all the time is all of these approaches are flawed. Every technique, every media measurement technique is flawed for some reason or another, right? Market mix modeling doesn't work because it doesn't give you the level of granularity that a marketer needs to make decision. Incrementality takes weeks to run, right? It's a really long planning process, takes a long time to study, it takes a long time to get that insight back. MTA is not working anymore because of privacy stuff we'll talk about a little bit later. Like you can't get the level of tracking that you used to have 5 years ago. So all of these measurement techniques are flawed. And because of that, none of them are the best. So I tell them, we got to use all of them, right? Using all of these techniques, and this really applies beyond just marketing, right? There's no one technique that applies for any use case, right? Every measurement solution is limited by some factor. So I like to use all of them. And when we start seeing signals, similar signals across platforms, we start having more confidence in, is a channel working or is it not working, right? So if I see in marketing mix, like, yeah, Facebook's working, if I see MTA, multi-touch attribution, Facebook's working, and I see an incrementality, like, okay, we feel pretty confident. I won't be precise. I can't have the precision that's saying, yes, it is works at a ROI, return on investment of 1.5, right? Because they're all kind of giving mixed signals. But directionally getting that insight across various platforms, then we're more confident that this is working. So again, the main thing from this one, the different techniques available for marketing measurement, no technique is the best, so use them all. I recognize that not everyone on this call may be marketers, but I also want to give a different example of product analytics. So marketing, attracting customers to your platform, right? Getting people in through the door and getting to register. Then when you got them on the platform, there's a whole other discipline of analytics called product analytics. And I actually took the name product out because it should be called user analytics. Because what we're understanding here is not necessarily the product. I'm not analyzing the product. I'm trying to understand the user and how they interact with the product. And that's, like, I think, a key differentiation, just like in terms of framing. Similar to marketing effectiveness, no single technique, insight, approach is going to work. And that's why I broke it out in 2 different categories. One is qualitative insights and the behavioral insights, so data-driven insights is where I spend most of my time as well. Qualitative insights is driven primarily by research teams, right? There's 2 techniques, 2 approaches that they use. They do like surveys, like send out broad surveys. So like, why did you do this? Why do you not like our platform? I'm not really going to understand why they didn't like something through data, through like kind of behavioral data. The only way to get the insight is just by asking them, right? And so really understanding why they don't like it. Because I know they're not going to the website. I know they're not converting, but I don't understand why they didn't do that. So that's why qualitative insights are so crucial and critical to understanding, to like building a good product. There's surveys, right? Which is like, you can do it at scale. You can do it to like hundreds of people at a time. And there's also focus groups, right? So a survey, yeah, you email it and you kind of send it out. But focus groups is a different technique where you're just getting like 5, 10 people in a room and be able to ask them questions, like very specific questions, and we're kind of dig a little deeper as to understanding why decisions are being made or what they want to see or what kind of product features they're looking for. So that's one half of the equation. The other half is behavioral, right? Understanding what they're actually doing and what they're clicking on or what they're doing with the product, how they're using the product, how they're not using the product. When we're able to marry these 2 insights, that's awesome, right? Similar to when we talked about before, is like you have these 3 different techniques. When they align, it's great. Here, when you have qualitative and behavioral aligned up, then the decision makers, the CEOs or executives, whatever, they feel more confident about making decisions. Because if one's saying one go put a red click button, and the other one's saying put a different color click button, then it's like it's hard to make a decision, right? And the color of a button may seem inconsequential, but something of more of a product feature where consumers or customers are really interacting with what to use, it's critical to have these kind of 2 insights aligned and telling the same story. What kind of decisions can we make through product analytics? There's a whole host of decisions that are being used. If we go to the right-hand side of the screen, what's the best user experience, right? So you can ask people, what's the best user experience? Another technique through behavioral data is just rapid experimentation. And a lot of the startups are really good at this, right? They're experimenting all the time. Like anytime you go to a website, you may or may not know but you're probably either in a control or a test group, right? They're testing a new feature, a new layout, new colors, all these different things, because we're always trying to optimize the user experience. The only way to do that is through rapid experimentation, right? Constantly doing and trying out new things. Before experimentation was popular, you would sit in meetings and boardrooms or just like arguing. Like I remember when I was at Citibank, there was an argument about what color black to use. Like there's one person said this was too black, others said it wasn't black enough or whatever. Like what's happening right here? Those debates don't happen anymore, right? You say, okay, you like this black? Oh, someone like this black. Let's try it out and test it, right? And there's not an argument, right? It's just testing it, see what works, and coming back and iterating on that. So rapid experimentation is huge, right? Always test, always try out new things. Other ways to do testing, and I'm going over time, so I'm going to run through the next few pages. LTV modeling, understanding who are your most valuable customers and users. LTV is lifetime value. So how much revenue are they generating or how much profit are they generating for you? Conversion modeling, right? Understanding who's converting, who's not converting, who's most likely to convert. This other one is really important is the way we use data is through segmentation clustering. Everyone that comes to use a product is there for a different reason. Everyone is not the same. If you're able to understand differences in behavior, differences in usage of the product, you can essentially create a unique product experience. When Mark comes in to whatever, any website, he has a different use case than myself, right? We need to create for Mark a best degree possible, a unique experience for him versus for me, a different experience. So if we're able to create unique experiences by understanding the segmentation and by clustering, which is a technique, we can create a better product experience for them. And then finally is churn and retention modeling, which is like why people leave and why people don't use the product anymore. There's a few more slides and we'll open up to Q&A. Sorry, I'm running a little bit behind. I want to go back to my first comment I made is saying data is the most valuable asset, right? So if we were in a classroom, I would ask you, or if we were in person, I'd ask you what happened in mid 2001. Why did that? This is the stock price, the ticker price for Meta or Facebook, and you can see it from 2018 to current up to today, right? So in 2018 it was like $175. It jumped all the way up to $375, and then now it's at $129, right? Which is like really bad, like less than a third of where it was in its peak in mid 2001. I would ask you what happened in mid 2000, right? So some people say it's the pandemic is starting to go down or these things, but in the advertising world, there's this big thing that happened on April 26th. So anyone in digital marketing specifically, you probably know this date, right? So Apple released iOS 14.5, right? This is a pretty innocuous event. Like I get Apple updates all the time. It's not a big deal. But for marketers, we were planning for months for this, right? All stressed out. Facebook or Meta put a big ads in all the major publications, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, saying don't let Apple do this thing, right? And this thing was what you see on the right-hand side. So for those that have an Apple iPhone, you may see this thing pop up when you download a new app, right? And essentially says, helps our ad partners aggregate information about you and provide you with a more personalized experience. Most people, I would say everyone, even myself, I hit ask app not to track because I don't want anything tracking me. Why that was such a huge thing, right? And why you see Facebook's stock price fall from 375 down to 129 is because what Facebook is built on is data, right? It has so much data about so many people, right? Through Instagram, through WhatsApp, through Facebook. They have this huge thing of this huge asset of data. And on top of that, they have so many algorithms, like this huge algorithm they're running to identify the right product for the right person, right? And that's like every marketer's dream. The right product for the right person, at the right time, right? With the right messaging. How can we do that? And Facebook Meta had all this data. After iOS 14.5, they lost that, right? Like companies tanked. so a lot of companies are facing some challenges in terms of marketing and acquisitions, acquiring the right customers, and as a result, they kind of pull back on their Facebook spend, and as a result, Meta or kind of tanked in terms of stock price. The reason I bring this up is we as data owners have a responsibility to our customers, right? We have like our customers entrust us with their data, right? It's AWS, like we provide service to a lot of healthcare companies, but not even just AWS. Every company has a responsibility to their customer, right? And it is like we need to take care of their data and use it in a responsible and right way, right, to serve our customers in the best possible way. All these 4 or 3-letter acronyms on the right hand side, this is a result of the Wild West that was there 5 years ago. When I first got into this data world, we could do anything, right? I was kind of scared. I'm like, what is happening? You could track users at all different places. Like, I remember we were trying to do billboards, out-of-home advertising, right? We were able to track people who walked in front of billboards, right, through like GPS tracking, like and understand like were they exposed to this ad? Did it work? Did it not work? We had all this crazy stuff happening. But then like after like Cambridge Analytica, all this stuff happened, people finally started recognizing like, hey, this is not right. This is kind of messed up. And then for two reasons, like self-regulation. So companies have pulled back, like what Apple did, IDFA. Google's pulling back. They're making everything cookieless. I don't know if you've been following that on Google Chrome, but they've been kicking the can because they recognize their income's going to get hurt. So self-regulation is one way. So companies are regulating themselves, which is great. And the other one is like the more intrusive way is like through the government intervention, which is better for consumers, right? So government intervention is saying GDPR, so it's I forget what it stands for. It's like some European regulation. CCPA, which is the California Consumer Privacy Act, which essentially says like if you're going to advertise in California, you got to follow these rules. And because it's really hard to target specific countries and people are just going to impact it everywhere, all of the United States needs to follow CCPA, right? And so it's probably more complicated than a lawyer can probably explain it better. But essentially, CCPA, California regulations, have impacted all marketing in the United States. All to say is, we as data owners, we as businesses should take good care of our customers' data, and there are measures in place through the industry, like Apple, Google, and all the companies that are forcing us to take better care of customers' data, and government. And I think while it sucks for me as a marketer or as an analyst to like not be able to have that insight that I had before, me as a person, I appreciate that governments and industry is kind of helping with the regulation and with our data. A lot more to talk about that. It's like a whole class we can. When I used to teach at Western, I did a class just on ethics and privacy. And then just the last slide. So thanks again, Mark, Western, for inviting me to this conversation. I really appreciate this opportunity. For all the people on the call, feel free to reach out to me, grab a coffee, talk about data, analytics, we talk about the Giants or early 90s hip hop, whatever you want. And also, here's my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
That was okay. Can you guys hear me? Because
yes,
I can. Okay, can you see? Okay, I know what's going on here. Gallery. There you go. I'm there. Okay, cool. I got it. That was great. Thanks so much. I know that was really quick. It's interesting because I some of you may know, I'm director of the MBA program, but I also teach the digital marketing undergraduate class. And one of the things that I talk about in that class a lot is A/B testing and coming up with things like that. And the thing I like to talk about, the value of data and the value of experimentation is you don't have to listen to the hippo anymore. And the hippo is the highest paid person's opinion. So instead of the boss saying, I like the blacker black, you can be like, well, let's see what our users say, and we kind of go from that. And the other thing I thought that was really interesting about what from what I teach. So I teach the marketing strategy class, which is the sort of the second marketing class in the MBA program. And one of the things that I think that's really important that I talk about a lot that Sachin was hitting on was, in terms of how, if you're looking at your customers, it's all about segments, and it's looking about sort of how the different segments interact. Descriptive data is great if you understand that it doesn't really, you can't really be just too strategic with descriptive data. And so there's a case that I've been doing for a long time around a marketing campaign for BMW. And there's this red herring in the case analysis where they make a big point of talking about how the average age of a BMW buyer is 46 years old. But what I tease out when we have our discussion is how that really doesn't matter, because a 3 Series buyer is much younger than a 5 Series buyer who's much younger than a 7 Series buyer. And so you have to think about them as 3 different segments with different averages and things like that, as opposed to like one average for BMW. But so I just thought that was pretty cool. I wanted to add that. So the first question I have for people posed for Sachin was, how do you deal with sort of bad data? Like I know from my doctoral program, a lot of what we talked about was how much time it takes to clean up data. But like, what are some examples of like having in your career, how you've had to deal with sort of data that needs cleaning?
Yeah. So data hygiene, data cleanliness is like paramount to have a successful data organization. We put a lot of, I'll speak mainly on the marketing side because that's where I spend most of my time. We put a lot of time in investing in setting up standardization for taxonomy or naming convention, right? So a great example is like before we had naming convention at IBM, like people would type in Facebook and as one word or as 2 words, or put FB and put all these things in place. And then when I'm trying to do the analysis, I would spend hours trying to clean it up and get that all done. If you could fix it at the source, right, when it's entered, it saves so much time for everyone, right? It's a lot of investment, and it requires people to follow this naming convention, naming standardization, but getting it cleaned at the source where it's human intervention is the best place. So spending time to get it standardized in the beginning is paramount. But yeah, like data scientists, I'm not a data scientist, but data scientists, when they do their analysis, they spend so much time on cleaning their data, right? Like the modeling part is like the easier part, but acquiring and cleansing of the data is where they spend most of their time. And even analysts like myself, we spend a lot of time cleaning too, but like the cleaning, it takes a considerable amount of time.
That's great.
Just one more example.
Example,
like data cleanliness and data harmonization. Like harmonization, what I mean by that is like Facebook may call something spend, Google calls it cost, and TikTok calls it, I don't know, media dollars, right? So like just spending all the time just getting aligned on definitions is another area of opportunity, right? It's about the cleanliness part.
That's great. No, that makes a lot of sense. So what are some resources that you know of for people who want to sort of further their knowledge about data analytics? Are there classes, webinars, websites, blogs, thought leaders that you think are worth checking out regularly?
Yeah, there's a lot of online learning classes, which I think are really great. So I used to work at Masterclass. So I'm not going to pitch Masterclass since it's more like personal stuff, like cooking and stuff like that. But there are great online, free, open source MOOCs. Classes. So like if you think about Coursera, LinkedIn Academy, Udemy, all great places where you can get really top-notch instructors teaching you like accessible, usable, and like business relevant tools and techniques to understand how to use data.
I can recommend all 3 of those. I've used them in my digital marketing class.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Yeah,
they're really good. So you're obviously a pretty smart guy, and you understand all this stuff. And so you're sort of you're comfortable with this. But how are there? And I liked your idea of. I want you to sort of expand on the democratization of data. And how can people who are non-programmers or non-data scientists engage with the data and play a role within data analysis within their organizations?
Yeah, so this goes to a lot on design, right? So a key part of data democratization is design, understanding what the user needs, right? So it's not just creating a dashboard and putting it out there, right? We need to understand what question are you trying to answer, and build a dashboard so it answers that in the most simplistic manner. So when I do a lot of work on dashboard building and report building, I'm trying to understand the users, what they need from it, and present to them only that information to not overwhelm them. So in going back to your question is, I'm trying to create an experience for everyone to access. So marketers, non-technical people to access this data in an easy to consume format, right? And that's part of the democratization, right? It's not just so only I can use it using SQL query or Python or R, right? It's for everyone in the most simplistic way.
Yeah, no, and then that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, if people are wondering what he's referring to, so SQL stands for structured query language. That is a way, the sort of a standard way to pull data from databases, and it's a programming language that's actually not that hard to pick up. There's like you can do a couple of YouTube things and feel pretty good with SQL. Python, actually, you want to describe Python?
Yeah, Python and R are just kind of two. So Python is has a lot of use cases, right? It's it's a programming language. It's you can do front end programming or back end programming, but like the way I use it is more for like data science or analytics, right? So like there's all these organizations, companies, academic institutions that are putting out these packages or libraries, and what these libraries say, like really smart people are saying this is the right way to do this type of analysis, and then you're grabbing their code essentially, and you're applying it to your use case. You're doing some minor modification to it, but you're taking that pre-existing language or package and applying to your use case. And R is a similar thing.
Yeah, I want to say, for all the people who want to sort of level up in their career, in my opinion, and I don't want to sound too dorky about this, but I know a lot of smart people. Like I've gone to a lot of prestigious universities, and where they got their diploma, when I looked at LinkedIn, doesn't necessarily tell me as much as if they say that they know how to use R. If you know how to use R for data analysis, R is basically just like SPSS or Excel on steroids. But if you know how to use R, in Dr. Mark Staton's brain, you are an incredibly smart person. And so, so feeling comfortable with R is a really, really marketable skill.
100%. And R and Python, I would argue, are the two languages and packages used. And the crazy thing is, like when I went to school, and I don't even know now, like they didn't teach. R and Python weren't things. Like people just pick it up and you learn on your own.
Yeah,
and like
that's what happened in my doctoral program. You just got to pick it up.
Yeah, and there's so many opportunities to learn. Like there's all these boot camps, there's Coursera, LinkedIn, all these places you can learn it, and like it's just amazing the things you can do with these two languages.
Yeah, no, I would if anyone wants to, that's I think the next step for someone who's really interested in sort of building a career on this is feeling really comfortable in those, particularly SQL, Python, and R. I'm really glad you brought that up.
And the thing is, like, you don't need to like learn the details of it. Like all these companies are building these packages, even SQL, right? Even the most basic language, you just need to know how to read it, because like even me, I don't do SQL anymore, but when I had questions, you Google it, you'd be like, oh, cool, someone already did this, copy paste it, adjust some of the syntax in it, and it works for you. Same thing with R and Python. You just Google it and you can figure out how to apply it for your use case.
I like to tell my students that life is actually an open book exam.
Yep.
That like, you know what, if you got a question, just look it up and then figure out, a couple different sources, and then you kind of go from there, and you're usually pretty good.
Yeah. And I think that going back to like we didn't bring it up yet, but the MBA education, like I think like the statistics and the very specific things I learned, I probably don't. Statistics I use only for my use case, but like you don't apply that on a regular basis. I think what you apply, what I learned, what I still apply today is frameworks. How to apply various frameworks, right? And like the technical aspects of it, you can always Google or whatever, but like how to think about problems, how to think about how to solve problems. I think this is where you learn from undergrad or even graduate school.
Yeah. So another question I have is, these are two kind of things that I think these two questions are somewhat related. I used to teach the marketing research class, and one of the things we talk about is sort of the difference between primary and secondary data. And the definition that I always used was primary data is data that's collected to answer this specific question, where secondary data is data that's collected for another reason, but then you are able to use it for the question that you're trying to answer. And so the way you describe sort of the data that you're using, the customer data, the behavioral data, I would characterize that as actually secondary data, because it's the data that they're sort of leaving not to be part of your study. It's just you're sort of ending up using it. Would you agree with that?
The way I classify first party data and third party data, I'm not familiar with this term second party data, but we use a lot first party and third party. I don't know why the industry has missed second party, but first party data is that we collect on our own, the company collects, right? So your interaction on our website, your interaction with the ads, your interaction with the product, that's first party. Third party data is like there's a whole industry on third party data, which are data providers, and they provide data for a variety of reasons, but I use that data to enhance my view of an individual, right? So you kind of append it to your first party data to understand a more holistic view, because not only do you want to know what they do on your website, for example, but what other websites are they going to? What other things are they doing outside of my own experience?
Are you, as a data analyst person, ever sort of concerned about the validity of the third party data or a bias associated with the third party data?
Yeah, it's
some third party data better than other third party data?
Yeah, of course. Like it's how the data is acquired, right? There's two different ways of when they do their modeling. It's like probabilistic or deterministic. Deterministic is like, yes, we know for a fact that this person did it. We saw them visit this website, so we have more information. Probabilistic is more modeling, right? They're modeling all these models on it. Like we think Mark works at Western, right? Because he's in South Hill. Right, he commutes to like this area a lot, so we think he's at Western. That's more probabilistic. Deterministic, hey, we followed him. He stopped at the Western campus, and he's definitely a professor. So there's two different types of things. But yeah, when it's more probabilistic, you're less confident in it. But it's a signal, right? You're not making the entire decision based upon that. It's a signal to help inform your strategy.
Yeah, I had a funny experience once where I don't know if you can still do it, but I remember a couple of years ago it was like this thing you could sort of look under the hood in Google and have figure out what Google thinks you are. And I think it's because I listen to a lot of pop music and buy a lot of sneakers. They thought Google thought I was a lot younger than I actually am. So I thought that was pretty cool.
But in terms of marketing, right? You may buy similar things that a young person may buy, right? If you're buying sneakers and that's
what I tell my students all the time, that like in terms of segmenting the market, we've talked about sort of geographic segmentation or psychographic or demographic, but those are all kind of, and then the fourth kind is behavioral. And I always say behavioral is the most important because the first three are essentially proxies for the fourth.
Yeah,
and exactly. So if you can really focus on behavioral data, you're much more likely to get the information that you really want. I could talk about this forever, but we got to wrap this up. This has been great.
Awesome.
So there was a question, Sachin, can you go in the chat and put your email and LinkedIn address in there? I totally have a cold, so I'm coughing. All right. So while he's doing that, I want to thank the wonderful Sachin Pai, and from all of us at Western Washington University, and the MBA program, we want to thank you for joining us today. We also want to thank the WWU Alumni Association, and because we couldn't have, for their partnership, we could not have done this without them. And we'd like to thank those of you who chose to support the MBA program by attending this webinar. So the recording of this webinar will be emailed out in the next few days. So please check soon for the arriving email with a link to this. And we hope you'll be able to join us for our next WWU one-day webinar series in November. Have a great day. And Sachin, thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, take care.